Hi everyone, welcome to this week's short attention span webinar. We are talking today, Kelly, from about 10,000 feet, if not higher. So we can't quite dictate everything that somebody should do with their sales day, but just wanted to give kind of a framework. Right? So the beginning and the end of these things are tied in. It's important, we've said this how many times, it's important to start the day with a plan, and it's important to finish the day creating the plan for tomorrow. So talk a bit about that. What's that about?
Well, it's really, again, one of our big kind of rallying cries is preparation.
Right.
So it's basically saying if you show up for work and you already know what you're going to do, that already makes you that much more efficient and that you're already that much ahead of the game because you already know what you're trying to accomplish, instead of showing up for work, sitting down, getting your coffee, and then going, okay, what am I supposed to be doing today?
Right.
I'm going to say you're probably going to save anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour a day by following this tip.
Yes. And
make yourself that much more effective and that much more successful.
And there's benefits that go beyond that. Like, for example, you're able to just relax at night. You know, if you get a plan for tomorrow, then you can just exhale. You don't have to say, oh, I got all this stuff. It's all set.
Right.
You know, let tomorrow go.
Right.
Next up is recognize that you won't catch up. So there you go. There's kind of a mantra, a time management thing. I'm looking down at my desk, and thank God this is a headshot that goes from here to here because you wouldn't want to see what's going on down here. And there's stuff everywhere. And you just say to yourself, you know what? Here's my to-do list. I'm never going to get through all this.
Right.
Oops. Whee, right there. I'm never going to get through all this. It's just not going to happen. It's getting longer, longer down here. So, moving on to the next point, you identify your top priorities. So my top priority this morning was to write some short attention span webinars so that when I had you on the line, we can record a bunch of them.
Right.
Okay, that's number one. And then I got an arrow next to another one. It was about, I think that's one about the vertical market webinar. I got to rewrite that one, you know, for the hospitals. And those have arrows next to them. Right. Do you work that way as well? I mean, you're a working mom.
I was actually just going to say that sometimes having a list as long as yours might absolutely cripple somebody, depending on how their minds work and having that many things to do, even though some of those things on your list may be for later this week or even later this month or even further out than that.
Right.
You may actually want to work in smaller chunks and just say, for today, because what you're about to say is that we have to focus on what's most important in the moment or in this particular chunk of time. But if it's easier for you out there, folks, to say there are really 3 things that have to happen today, it's okay to only put those 3 things on your list. Like, don't overwhelm yourself if you're easily overwhelmed.
Right.
Don't set yourself up to fail by going, oh my gosh, there were 40 things on this list and I only got 10 done. Because some people would celebrate that and other people would see that as a colossal failure. So understand yourself well enough to know what that to-do list should look like, how many items should be on it, and what's okay to push tomorrow, the next day, the next week, the next month.
And you know what, Kelly, I just wrote a blog on this last night. I think it's coming out, it's coming out later on this month, but I was talking about, you know, things that you shouldn't put on your to-do list. You should just do them. You know, and I am the king of this. It's like I look at my to-do list and I'll say, how did it get so long? What I'll do is I'll say, oh, here's a good idea. I think I'll send everybody that went to the Las Vegas event an email. And I write it down. Instead of just sending them the email. You know, do it now. Do it right now.
Well,
or don't do it.
Yeah. Well, there's a big distinction there between doing it or don't doing it, or doing it in the moment. Like if it really is something that's only going to take you 30 seconds, then just do it. But sometimes the notion, there's a few reasons to have a to-do list in the first place. Number 1 is because you think you might forget. And number 2 is to feel that sense of accomplishment. So I know that when I'm falling asleep at night, sometimes they'll cycle into my brain. And I'll be like, oh gosh, I wish I had done that today, or why didn't I write this down, or why doesn't this exist somewhere to remind me? Because if falling asleep is the only time to remember to do it, there's a good chance it's not going to get done.
Right.
And we can have a whole other conversation about consequences. Like, you're going to get to the things that have a consequence to them or a reward to them. But you know, again, everybody works differently. So I think you need to identify who you are and what works for you and construct that this whole concept of managing your time and getting things done to what works best for you.
So we talked me back up on priorities for a second, because I just got finished talking to somebody about this. And this is in that white paper I wrote called How to Make 7 Sales Calls a Day. One of the things that next on our list here is this the best use of my time? What is the best use of my time? If you make sales a priority, if every time I complete a task or I get off the phone recording with you, if I make 2 phone calls, bam, bam, and I did that 3 times a day, 4 times a day, that's how you get to 6, 7, 8 calls.
Yep.
Before you get to this stuff, you pick up the phone and you should be able to prospect on a dime. So I got my list right here in my spreadsheet. Couple phone calls, bam, move on. That's how you get it all done. So there's my top priority. I'm in selling mode here in February. That means you get that done pronto, pronto. And then you end the day with a plan for tomorrow. So what does that look like? Depending on what kind of a software program, or if you're just using calendar on your computer or whatever, just lay it out. You can even take out a piece of paper and lay it out and say, all right, here's what's going to happen. I've got that 10:30 thing with Kelly, and then I've got an 11 o'clock, and then I've got to go for lunch with a friend or whatever. You get it all on one piece of paper, and that's how you end your day. All right, get into that cycle. That's a 10,000-foot view of how to make the most of the day and stay efficient.
Planning the day tomorrow at the end of the current day doesn't have to take a ton of time either, Bill. I mean, it can be 10 minutes of a review of, as you said, it can either be linear based on time, or it can be task-oriented based on things I need to get done tomorrow, or it can be a combination of those two things.
Right.
So it probably should be a combination of those two things. And that's, again, that's really the key, is to not show up tomorrow going, what's my day going to be today?
Yeah,
that you already know it. And what you're really talking about, Bill, is it's a habit. It's about it's changing your habit. It's forming a habit. And those things are not going to happen just by magic or wishing, or, you actually have to put them into practice.
Okay, so we've exceeded your attention span. Sorry. Next week we'll talk about the week musts, the sales week musts. So we'll work on that. And thanks very much, Kelly. Great job, as usual.
Thanks, Bill.
And we'll talk to you all next week at another short attention span webinar.